Welcome, Jay Wu.
Thank you, Steve. Well, we have got a really nice panel of guests. But now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our star panel and championship speakers tonight. First one would be Zhong Shao, a 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking semifinalist. And then Aaron Sampson, three-time district champion and 2020 World Championship of Public Speaking finalist, and our glorious President Stephen Chin, 2021 World Championship of Public Speaking finalist. So each of them will be giving us a speech for about 5 to 7 minutes. And Joe Chu will be our timer and will be reminding us the use of time using green, yellow, and red backgrounds. So folks, stay tuned, and I will turn the floor to Joe. Let's welcome Joe.
Hi. Of course, I start off by leaving myself muted. That's what everybody does. Well, thank you everybody for showing up tonight. I'm glad to have everybody here at the open house. As you can see, we're talking about the journey to the World Champion of Public Speaking with myself, with Aaron Sampson and Stephen Chin. We got a good presentation for you today. We're going to walk through some of our experience competing up to some of the highest levels. And then we're also going to talk about some of our process and some of the ways we develop our speeches. So if you have any questions, if you could hold it until the end, we'll definitely listen to some of those. So let's go ahead and jump into the agenda before, so we can see what's going on here. We're going to talk about an intro. We're going to talk about ourselves. We're going to talk about our experiences in competition. We're going to talk about speech selection, how we choose a speech, how we develop it. We're going to talk about delivery, what we do when we deliver it, how we work on the delivery. The virtual setup tips, so that's relatively recent. If you've been competing in Toastmasters for a while, you know everybody's had to learn, how do I set up my virtual studio so that I can compete in a way that enhances my message as best as possible instead of just having somebody on a cell phone. And then we're going to talk about practicing and feedback, and then we'll talk about questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down. And the first thing that you guys might be wondering is, why do I want to listen to these people? What's their experience? Is their experience really any different from mine? What's their background? Why do I care what Joe and Stephen and Aaron have to say? So you can see here we are, pictures of us when we've won. That picture of me on the right is about 80 pounds lighter than I am now, with a little bit more hair on my lip, but that was me. And you got a couple of us right there. We're going to talk about our experiences, and we decided to go chronologically. So I have been a member of Toastmasters since 2011. I joined when I lived in Ohio. That was District 40. I was working at JP Morgan Chase. I had a club there, and I joined a couple of weeks before the humorous speech contest. And I had been a humor writer in my spare time. So I thought, I got this in the bag. I'm going to beat everybody. So I went in and I competed and placed 5th out of 5 speakers. And the person who spoke 4th didn't really speak English all that well. Now, there's nothing wrong with not speaking English all that well, but it kind of hit me as somebody who's a humor writer and expected to do well, got beat by somebody who doesn't really speak English all that well. That made me realize that I actually had to do some work on speaking, not just writing. And that's one of the first lessons I learned in Toastmasters is there's a difference between writing and speaking. They're 2 different skills. They're related, but they're 2 different skills. So I worked for several months studying some of the people who won the World Champion of Public Speaking, studying a lot of the District 40 competitors who'd done well, learning from them. And that year I made it to the district contest and finished 2nd place, which was cool. I thought I was going to go, it was going to be in Florida. I thought I was going to go to Florida and compete, but I didn't quite make it. So the next year I competed again and finished 2nd at district. And you can see a theme starting to play itself out here. I competed several years and finished 2nd or 3rd at district. I moved to North Carolina in 2014. And so the 2015 competition, I said, this is mine, I got it. And we went in and I competed, and I finished 2nd at the division contest to somebody who went to the finals. I've competed against multiple people who've made it to the finals and finished just beneath them several times. 2016, I moved to Florida in District 84. And District 84 had a lot of really good speakers. Several of them had made it to the finals. And I was lucky enough to make it to the speech competition, the district competition. It was at a big hotel here in Orlando. I'm in Florida. For those of you who don't know, I live in Orlando, Florida. And I did the speech competition and I thought I did really well. And they're going through and naming off the winners. They name the third place winner, they name the second place winner, and then they go first place, Joe Shaw. And I'm like, who's that? Oh, that's me. And I was freaking out because I was just couldn't believe that I had won. And right after they announced my name, I heard this from across the room. And my friend Humberto Santiago, who's 6'7" and like 350 pounds, just comes lumbering through the audience, grabs me and picks me up and gives me this bear hug. And they've got a picture of him giving me a bear hug when I won. One of the things I love about speech competitions, beyond just the fact that you have to prepare your speech to the absolute best to see where you need to improve, is that there's so much camaraderie among the speech competitors. Those of you who were around last year might have known that Stephen and I competed against each other in the club contest here at San Mateo Storytellers. And then we competed against each other again at district and finished first and second. What you might not have known is that we had been helping each other all along the way as we're developing our speeches. So I made it to the semifinals in 2016. It was in Washington, D.C. I was actually in person. It was a few months before the election in 2016. And we were at a hotel like 3 blocks down from the White House. And it was amazing to just see all these people from around the world, see some of the champs in person, up close and personal, and be able to talk to some of them. I met Darren LaCroix. While I was seeing they have this big list of everybody's names, of which region you're in. And I was sitting there and I was standing next to Aaron Beverly, who won in 2019. And we realized we worked for the same company for a while, so we became friends there. And you meet all these people and everybody is excited and everybody's helping each other. There's competition. You want to win, but it's not competition like I win and you lose. It's I win, but if I don't, hey, you did really well and I'm excited about it. And that's one of the things I love about those competitions. I did my the semifinal speech contest. I was standing backstage and everybody standing backstage kind of spread out. And we're all like sitting there trying to hide our ears. People had music they were listening to. Everybody's trying to deal with their nerves. And I was getting ready to go out. And somebody who I'd seen made the finals previously said, you've got one thing you need to make sure you do. No matter what happens, make sure you zip up your fly, because my zipper was down. So he saved me from horrible embarrassment in my speech contest. I went out and I did the best speech that I possibly could. And I placed third. And it was just exciting to be there. I had a wonderful time doing that. And I came back to Florida, and I've had some opportunities to speak at some conferences all around the country because people have seen that. I've had experiences meeting with people all around the country. It's been a wonderful experience speaking in the speech contest. I've again placed second at the district many times since then, including this past year. I placed second to a finalist again. They should name that award after me, finishing second to a finalist. It should be the Joe Shaw Award. You finished second. So, but it's been a great time, and I'm looking forward to this year's competition, and who knows what'll happen. So that's my experience in the speech contest, and I'd like to pass it off to Aaron, who has been a little bit more successful. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say. Aaron, can you tell us about your experience?
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Good to see everybody. Good to see so many guests on the call today. So a little bit about my Toastmasters journey. I actually discovered Toastmasters I was working at Mattel at the club at the time in 2011, 2012, and someone told me about Toastmasters. I had never heard of it, but I was like 31 years old at the time, and I got into the Tall Tales competition. I actually loved it. It's just like, this is great. I used to come from a performing background, so it hit a lot of the kind of values that I espouse in my work and in my personal life: creativity, sharing a message, sharing value-driven work, and presenting, of course. I DQ'd because I went over. I made it to like the finals of that contest, and I DQ'd. I was 3 seconds over. I learned a valuable lesson in Toastmasters: don't DQ. Just as valuable as zip up your fly. And I ended up taking a break. I didn't really understand the magnitude of the international speech contest, and I didn't realize at the time how much Toastmasters meant to me. But then it wasn't until 6-7 years later that I finally decided to compete. I was in a different company at the time. And from there, I was living in LA, and I competed. A story that moved me tremendously. I wanted to share the message. I ended up winning district that year. I ended up going to semifinals in Chicago. It was the last year that there was an in-person event. And I placed second in my semifinal round. So I was very bummed about that. I didn't advance to the finals that year, but it did spark the fire in me and I got the bug. And then for the next couple of years, I ended up moving to the Bay Area where I reside now with my family. And I've competed the last 3 years. And I competed in District 4 for 2 years, which I won both those years. And then I competed in District 57 last year. And I went to the finals of the district, but I did not place. So definitely Toastmasters, I highly recommend for any guests on the fence. Definitely compete. Hopefully you get, if there's one thing you take away from today, it's throw your hat in the ring and compete, because you will learn a lot. You make a lot of good friends along the way. And if you enjoy presenting and you enjoy the art form and the artistry of sharing a message, you'll learn so much. And I will pass it over to Stephen to share his story.
Thank you, Aaron. When I first joined Toastmasters, and I joined this club in 2014 as a founding member, all I wanted to do was learn how to speak better because I wanted to tell my story with my own voice. One of the other founding members of this club, Leanne Matangelo, was a distinguished Toastmaster and a former finalist in the World Championship of Public Speaking. That sounded so cool and so utterly impossible for me at the time. All I wanted to do was get better at speaking. And I had no dreams, no hopes of ever getting to that stage. But Lee gave me the secret of speaking better faster. Compete every chance you get. So I entered my first contest only a month after joining the club. And I was disqualified on time. I was over by 1 second. So, Aaron, you're in good company. But it didn't matter though, because I had so much fun and I learned so much from the other speakers and my evaluator. I wanted to do it again as much as I could. I kept competing every chance I got. And 2 years later in 2016, I actually made it to the finals, the district finals for District 4. And I competed against the other 9 finalists from San Francisco to Monterey in the international speech contest. And I didn't even place. But again, it didn't really matter because I had a lot of fun. And for years after that contest, strangers I'd never met before would come up to me and tell me how much my speech touched them and how much they remembered it. That kept me going, and I still kept competing and learning every chance I got. In 2021, as Joe mentioned, he and I competed at this club's international speech contest. I took 3rd. Joe took 1st place at our club that night. And he deserved it because I wasn't quite ready for that. I wasn't mentally prepared. We had just gone into the pandemic and it just wasn't my time. But it's a good thing I belonged to 3 clubs. The next week, I took 1st place at the San Francisco Storytellers International Speech Contest, and I barely did that. So I knew that I had to get better. I kept practicing in front of as many audiences as I could and learning and tweaking my speech at every stage, all the way up to the district contest. As it turned out, Joe also had won his area and division contests, so he and I would be facing off at the district. And as Joe mentioned, he and I have been helping each other along the way. So I sent him my video for the international speech contest for district, one of my practice videos. And Joe got tied up with a new job. So he didn't send me his material for the finals. It might have made a difference, but he wasn't able to do that. But at least he was able to give me his feedback on my video. And that made a lot of difference for me. So at the district 4 contest last year, I had one little obstacle I had to overcome just to compete in that contest. It was scheduled right in the middle of my vacation to Yosemite, where there's absolutely no Wi-Fi. It took me 3 days to muster the courage just to ask my wife if I could somehow stay behind or travel back in the middle of our vacation so that I could compete. My wife chewed me a new one for 3 more days. But after she saw how much this meant to me, she finally consented to let me come back in the middle of our vacation. That's how you know you married the right woman. I took the train back for about 6 hours the day before, and the next morning I competed. And as soon as I was done competing, I changed and jumped into a Uber back to the train station. And I was in that Uber when they announced the results of the district contest. I heard Joe take second place. And then I was heavily in anticipation of who was going to take first. As they were about to announce it, my Wi-Fi in the car went out. But a few minutes later, all my friends started calling me and letting me know that I'd won. I was so excited. I texted my family about it on the train trip back to Yosemite. And when I finally got off the train, I realized that I had absolutely no idea of what to do next. It's a good thing that I knew someone who'd actually been to the finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking before, Aaron Sampson. He was the first one I called. And he told me I needed to get a coach because at this stage, I'd been beyond anything that I'd ever done before. So I needed someone who's actually traveled that path before. So I was lucky to get Lance Miller, the 2005 World Champion of Public Speaking, to be my coach for that year. And actually, as it turned out, he was not only coaching me, he was coaching 2 other semifinalists, one of which won the World Championship of Public Speaking this past year. So I was in good company once again. When Lance first reviewed my videos for my speeches, I gave him 2 speeches to review. My district winning speech, which had also won the regional quarterfinals, I felt pretty good about. My second speech, I knew needed a lot of work. But we started with the more advanced speech, which is the one I won with. And when he listened to it, I thought he'd have some minor tweaks. But after he'd reviewed it, I felt like I got my ass handed to me. There were so many changes he made, good changes. But it was a bit hard to go through because I'd never seen that kind of detail in an evaluation before. But he was doing his job. So I was able to compete with that, and the changes that he gave me helped me win the semifinals and make it to the finals. Sharing my message, the next step, on the world stage with the other top 8 finalists in the World Championship of Public Speaking last year was the proudest moment of my life. It took 3 days after I delivered that final speech before the results were announced. I have to admit, I was disappointed that I didn't make it, that I didn't even place. But I felt honored just to be in the finals. Now, I don't check social media very often, but when I finally looked at my Facebook page a couple weeks later, I found a note from a fellow semifinalist that I had never met before, telling me how my speech really touched her. Her note meant more to me than any trophy or title I could ever hope to win. It was the reason I began this journey in the first place, and the reason I keep competing and growing every chance I get. If you want to find the joy and power of connecting with your audience on a deep emotional level, I hope you'll join me on this journey and compete every chance you get. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Joe to carry on with the rest of our program. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It was great to hear the different perspectives that you guys have. I know we all have a different experience, and I think we have a unique perspective when it comes to competition and how we develop things. And I'm sure the questions that people have in their mind are, great, you've made it to that level, or you guys made it to the finals. I almost got to the finals. How do you do that? Beyond just, work really hard, what does that mean? What does the work look like? What does the development look like? So we can go through that and start talking about speech selection, how we build a speech, how we select a speech, how we build a speech and practice through it. So I got a couple slides here. Now, Aaron built this initially, so I'm going to flow my way through this. Aaron, feel free to tell me if I need to add anything, guys. Just jump in as you need to. Stephen and I were talking about this a while ago about how we develop a speech. And Stephen said, well, you start with the message. And then once you got that message worked out, then you develop a story. And then once you get that story worked out, then you start developing the delivery mechanism. And I'm a little different. I usually start with the story and then let the message come from that and then move into the delivery mechanism. So we got three different pieces that you definitely have to have. You have to have a compelling story. You have to have a heartfelt message, and you have to have a dynamic delivery. For me, a compelling story is something that tugs at the heartstrings. If you were to graph it, it would start up here way high on the y-axis, go down below the x-axis, and come right back up at the end. But I'm an analytics math guy, so I'm definitely going to graph it. But usually, if you tell somebody how do you graph a story, it's a boring story. So I've been a storyteller and writer most of my life, so it's kind of second nature to me. I know a lot of people have to go through some storytelling seminars, so I don't really know how to coach story. It's just something that's always worked for me. When I was a kid, I grew up sitting on the back porch of my grandpa's house, listening to him tell stories. He's just a natural storyteller. My dad's a natural storyteller. So I kind of just grew up in that environment. A heartfelt message is a message that somebody needs to help them affect their life. For mine, it was forgiveness. For Stevens, it was not sweating the small stuff. For Aaron, I cannot remember the message in your speech. I apologize off the top of my head, but usually most of the competitors have a message that really resonates with a lot of people. And then the delivery is thinking about ways to present it that's a creative way that not a lot of people do. You don't just stand there and speak. You have to use hand gestures, you have to use vocal variety, but you also have to look at how you build your story along the way. So Aaron, do you have any comments that you'd like to give on how you build a speech or choose a speech through some of this?
Yeah. I don't think there is one way that works for everybody. It's really what works for you. I'm the same as Joe. I definitely start with the story in my writing, because that's what I think people resonate with the most. And then I try and find that compelling message. If it's just a story that at the end of the day, I don't think I can find a compelling message, then I may scrap that story. I'll certainly do it a few times at clubs to test it out. But if you don't have the message, it's hard to connect the two. I think some things that work for me, just to double click on what works for me, if you've seen any of my speeches, I tend to be vulnerable and be, kind of admit mistakes. I find that when I'm vulnerable and admit mistakes or admit something I've done wrong, it makes me more relatable. And when you have your triumphant moment, or you have that learning moment from whatever the story is, that learning moment is key to delivering that important message. So having that kind of either something happened, you made a mistake, or there's some sort of thinking that you're thinking one way. I just want to make a lot of money, let's say, and then you have a story about, hey, that's what I'm doing, I'm going to make money, and then at the end there's this realization, or there's this moment in the story where you realize, oh God, this thought that I had, I was going to make money, is not true. And it's a paradigm shift within your story, and it makes it a more complex and layered story because it changes the dynamic. But typically that's how I think of my stories, and that's what I'm drawn to the most in my own writing, is kind of admitting mistakes and admitting kind of my own learning process and building from there. I think also, heartfelt message. I don't think we have slides talking about this, so I'll just kind of double click on this because I think it'll be helpful for those that are crafting their speeches. There's a lot of debate about Toastmasters, especially the speech contest, being kind of like, it's these 7 minutes kind of fluffy, like, using my own speeches, like say yes or choose, it's like sometimes the methods, the message is so watered down that it ends up being a little bit generic or cliche. And there's a fine balance between making the message so that it's more unique and original and complex versus having an audience who has no attention span at all understand the message. Because what we struggle with as contest speeches is when I push my speeches to really have a more complex message and something that's really earthy and real, sometimes it actually is not taken in by the audience as well, particularly Toastmasters judges. And that's who you're, if you're trying to win the contest, you're playing to judge, who at the end of the day, and they're seeing all these speeches in these 7 minutes, sometimes that more whittled down, watered down message may actually be more effective for you. I see I got a green card. I don't know what that means, but I'll pass it to Stephen to tell him what.
Soccer, you got a green card.
Well, thank you, Aaron. That's really great. And the heartfelt message, it's really something that the reason I start with that is because it helps me stay focused. As I'm crafting the story around it, usually for the heartfelt message, when you're crafting a story, it can take on several messages, especially as you get to the end. There are several messages that you can go off onto tangents with if you don't stay focused. So for me, it's more important for me to feel that heartfelt message and think about the lessons, how I learned that lesson. And I think that when it's heartfelt, when it comes from within, you come off as authentic, which you are. And more importantly, when it comes from the heart, there's more energy when you're delivering that message. So that's the reason why I'm a little different from Aaron and Joe, in that to me, it's the message that I start with. And I find the stories in my life that embody that message. And when it comes to the compelling story, most of us don't have big stories to start with. So the compelling story, the part about being compelling as a story, you can start with a small story and change it a little bit. It's okay to use some poetic license in your story. Not everything has to happen completely accurately. But if you embellish on it a little bit in the right places, you can make it a great story. I think Mark Twain once said that never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I think that's very true. So the story is important as long as it has a basis in truth. Then you can come across as telling the truth when you're telling your story. But the most important thing to me, at least, is that the message comes from your heart. And when you feel it deep inside, it shows. It shows how important it is to you. And that if it's important to you and you show that you're vulnerable in the way you deliver it, your audience will connect with you and it will be important to them as well. So I think that's pretty much what I have to add to that. And I think the dynamic delivery, obviously, Aaron's actually more talented with that than I am. I don't have any acting background.
More talented than me too.
I think this is an important slide. I know we probably are over our agenda, but I think we can.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Put it in later slides, because I just want to add a couple things about the story. So like a lot of times the message, and I want to build off of what I said before, the story, a good story can make a heartfelt message that's cliche, memorable. For example, be kind or show love. These are two things that hopefully most of us believe in on this call, and two very important things that we know it's true. Yeah, we should be kind, but living those in our lives and owning that in our bodies every day is sometimes a hard thing to do. Sometimes we're drawn towards not kind feelings, or we're drawn towards other types of things. The story is what can turn that cliche message and make it memorable and make it so someone really owns it. So the story, even though it's a cliche message, oh, be kind, yeah, show love. Yeah, okay, I'm going to show love. Yeah, well, I know. Okay, I'm going to show love. But the story, if it's done well and told well, will get someone to suddenly realize and look at their own life and be like, oh my God, I just need to be more present, or I just need to show love. I need to be with the people that are important to me. It all comes down to love. And then that's why that's such a powerful mechanism, is because people relate in terms of stories. So I know I said before, like, then there's always this push to have more of a complex message. Sometimes the cliche messages, become complex with the story. And sometimes the cliche messages are still difficult to own and embody. And it's a good reminder for people as well. And another thing is the content, the messages itself. I forgot the exact phrase. Maybe Stephen. Is it called an iconic phrase like trust is a must? The catchphrase. What is that called? Like
Foundational phrase.
A foundational phrase,
Foundational
right? So that's a
phrases.
common
Yeah.
term in Toastmasters jargon. Foundational phrases like trust is a must, or validate this, or say yes, in my speech, and it's really good to have foundational phrases, which oftentimes come across as cliche if you just say them outside of the context of the story. But the reason you have those foundational phrases is because it's like a Suzuki method of people memorize it, and they'll remember the heartfelt message, and you keep hitting it, and it hits your main point of your speech, that message.
Anything else, guys?
No,
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Feel free to ask questions later on, because we can come back to that one. So this is the strategy. So as you're going through, you've got a couple different speeches, maybe a couple different stories that you're working on, and you want to remember a few of these things as you're going along. First is practice 2 speeches. And I would imagine putting that in there would be, if you're going to make it to the district contest, if you're going to make it to the semifinals, you have to have a different speech in the finals than you do in the semifinals. So it's good to have 2 speeches ready to go. It's also good to have 2 speeches sometimes, because you'll get, I remember talking to Jim Key once. He said he had a guy who watched his division contest and then wrote a speech that was almost the same as his, as a way of trying to trump him in the finals. So Jim Key said, I wrote a completely new speech between division and district and beat him in district because I had another speech ready to go and he didn't, and he was trying to trick me. But then also it gives you opportunity of saying, I had this one speech that sometimes you get a speech that you just don't really feel great about it. Like I had one that was in the district a couple of years ago where I was like, it's decent, but it's not great. And if I could have had something else that was really more meaningful to me and really more meaningful to somebody else, I'd have gone with that. As long as you have a relatable story, you got to make sure that it relates to the audience. It needs to be inspirational, but you can make anything inspirational. If you watch some of Lance Miller's videos, the coach that Stephen had, he will develop a speech contest speech out of a plastic cup. Or he'll just say, one of the things he does in his keynotes is he'll say, name an object. And somebody say, a wrench. And then he'll develop on the fly a speech out of a wrench. So you can come up with that, but it's got to be inspirational. It also needs to be easily understood, because they've only got 7 minutes. They need to have that one message. You can't have 30 different points or 5 different stories. You got to have it easily graspable. And then it's got to have memorable moments within the speech, things that are really going to land really hard with the audience and just stick with it. Do you guys have any comments about that?
I'll just say the inspirational. This is something that I think it should be. My opinion is it has to be inspirational if you want to win. But certainly you can create any 7-minute speech that you want. Like a 7-minute speech, it can be a brilliant speech, and it can be anything you want. It's not called the inspirational Speech Contest, although a lot of people call it that. It's not called that. It's just called the World Championship of Public Speaking. The reason why inspirational works is because that's what wins. So if you want to win the contest and you want to advance, people respond to inspiration. So that's why that heartfelt message framed in an inspirational way is good. But you can give a great 7-minute speech on the Omicron variant and track the history of the variant, and it probably could be brilliant. But if it doesn't have a way to connect to people, how did the Omicron affect your life? How did it, that some sort of connection, it's hard to win this contest, even though your presentation, your delivery, and even the story might be good.
Stephen?
Yeah, as far as inspirational, I agree that it should be inspirational for actually as many speeches as you can make. She should make them as inspirational as possible. Not just to win a contest, but the fact is inspiration is, I think the one definition of it is to kind of breathe life into people, breathe life into your audience, lift them up. And everyone wants to be lifted up. Your audience will want to be lifted up. So the more inspirational you can be, the more humorous you can be, anything that lifts your audience up, the more engaging your speech will be. So I think that's why all the winners of the International Speech Contest have inspirational speeches. Not so much necessarily to win the contest, but it makes it more engaging. The International Speech Contest is called that because it brings the audience through a wide range of emotions. And one of them is inspiration. So it's something that you want your audience, you want your speech to be a roller coaster, as Joe mentioned. You want to bring them up, you want to bring them down, bring them back up. And you don't want them to see every curve that's coming. You want to surprise them because surprises are entertaining. So, the 4 primary goals of any communication are to inform, persuade, and let's see, I'm blanking on the other 2. Inform, persuade, entertain, and
Educate.
Uplift.
Educate.
Let's say it's uplift or educate.
No, that's
all right.
That's the inform part. But basically, the International Speech Contest, those entries, the successful ones go through all 4. They cover all 4 of those in the same speech, in a 7-minute speech. So it's inform, inspire. I think it's inform, inspire, persuade, and entertain. So those are the 4 main things, 4 main
The
communication.
3 critical things you need in the speech. Inform. Okay, that's funny.
5. No,
I want to add on, once you get me talking, Joe, I'm going to start talking. So easily understood.
Go ahead.
Let's double click on this for a second. This is an important one too, and it kind of drafts off of what I was saying about the cliche, the message, because you are playing to an international crowd. This is an international speech contest. Many people who are judges, English is not their first language. You will have to often, I don't like to use the words dumb down, but you will have to make your words and your verbiage more easily understood by someone who English is not a first language. That means taking away some more 9th grade level words and playing to a 3rd or 4th grade level. If you work with the Coach Prez, who I once worked with he runs your speech through a grade rubric. I don't know, it's some algorithm, and he wants to make sure that your whole speech is playing to a 3rd grade level, literally, because oftentimes those more complex words or more complex thoughts aren't graspable. So you will have to do that. And easily understood means that some of your more complex things you're going to have to simplify, especially internationally. And that's why I think we have it on an upcoming speech. We can talk more about how to ensure those moments are easily understood by like an international audience. And another thing is memorable moments, just to double click on that. memorable moments can happen in a lot of ways. They can happen with a foundational phrase, the repetition of a foundational phrase. They can happen visually, either coming towards camera, coming away from camera. They can happen with a prop. World champions have pulled their pants down. I mean, it's crazy, but it certainly made it memorable. I think a guy came out in his undies. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, and he won the contest. It made it memorable. And I'm not saying to come out in your undies, but you want to have moments which are going to be memorable visually and vocally. And I don't know why I pointed to my brain when I said vocally. That is not the right see and say. Wait, visually and vocally. But otherwise, those people will remember those moments, and they're good. You want those. Don't be too what's the word, hacky. I do stand-up comedy on the side, and that's a common term. And in Toastmasters, there's a lot of hacky people. People are just trying to repeat what other people have done before, or using just a weird prop just because they know, you don't want to do that. So you want to come up with your own visual and vocal memorable moments. Don't just try and copy and mimic those contestants and competitors that have competed before you.
Yeah, you got to learn your own voice and use that. So, all right. So virtual tips. How do we set up our speaking area? How do we set up for audio and video to make sure that it works in the virtual environment where we are now? Aaron, I believe this is your setup. Would you like to talk about how you went through and set yours up?
Yes, this is the room I'm in right now. Although this picture was taken I competed a different way last year. I'm not sitting in the same spot I'm in now. So, I mean, everyone's different. I don't have a rock star setup, to be honest, but what you will need is a good camera. I think for virtually, I use a MacBook Pro, my MacBook Pro, that's fine. But a lot of people use their own camera. You need a high def camera. That's bar none. You need that, whether it's on your computer or a separate camera. You do need a decent backdrop. I find a lot of people's backdrops are very distracting. I don't, right now I'm on a blurred virtual backdrop, but I don't recommend using any virtual backdrop. And for some of my contests, I don't know how it was this year, but they didn't want you using virtual backdrops at all. And oftentimes with virtual backdrops, your hair, you become like Pirates of the Caribbean. Your hair is floating and then it disappears. It just looks really odd and it's very distracting. So I would recommend just a regular backdrop. That's good. I had a screen, so that thing you see in the back is an actual screen setup. And then you want the camera, like right now I'm sitting down, but you want to elevate the camera to be at eye level. So that it's elevated. You want to stand for your speeches, for your contest speeches, unless you're really going for something different and you're, wanting to sit. Generally, you want your camera at eye level. And again, there's no hard and fast rules. You can sit for your speech. You can do whatever you want. It's your speech. So if you want to do that, maybe it comes off as more natural. Don't take what I'm saying or what Joe or Stephen is saying as like the word. You can do whatever you want for your speech. These are just my tips. You want to put your camera at eye level, and of course your camera, this is 101. Your camera is your eye contact, right? So this little green dot that I'm looking at, I know I'm making eye contact with you right now. During a contest speech, I'm looking at that constantly. Obviously, when I'm in a presentation like this, I want to see your faces on Zoom. So you see me glance down slightly and I'm looking at you, and I'm not giving a speech right now. I'm giving a workshop. So I don't look at how I'm looking right now as what it should be set up. For a contest speech, you want to engage with your audience, which is looking directly in the camera. That's why you want to elevate your camera so it's at eye level. And then you need lighting, of course, lighting rig. So you see those little umbrellas? I got them on Amazon. They're like $80 for a set. It's amazing. You get 3 lights, and just Google simple light setup. You get 3 lights. It comes with the umbrellas, comes with the fancy, I think, tungsten bulb or some fancy lighting bulb. And you set up, there's a way to set up. So you have 2 on the side and usually one little lower one on the back. And if you just Google how to do a basic light setup, you can figure it out. But I do recommend that. And then the final thing, of course, is audio. Do we talk about that later, Joe?
Yeah, we'll be talking about that.
My
in a
bad.
sec.
Just cut me off. Just cut me off.
All right.
There you go. Sorry. Pass it away. Take it away, Joe.
My setup was a little different. I was a little bit more low cost because I got 5 kids. um, and a lot of other things. But I have we have 2 really good lamps, so I have those that I would set up on either side in front of me, and then I would have my laptop, but I have an HD camera that it's a USB camera that I bought from Amazon for like 80 bucks. It's not that much, and it has just the one I'm using now. It's relatively good quality, but we also have some HD like actual photography cameras that we could use as well. So I'm experimenting with that for the next year. For me, the struggle that I had last year is because we have so many people in my house, there's really not a lot of space. So I have like, there's an area over here where there's a white wall behind me, but I've only got like 6 feet from where I can put the camera into where I have the wall. So like, I didn't have much depth. And I think this next year, that was a failure I had. And you could only see from like right here up, you couldn't really see my waist up where you're looking at Steven right now. So I'm watching other people speak and learning what their setups are. Like I was talking with Steven about what his audio mic is. I have an audio mic that I use for audiobooks that I used to record some that I have up there now, but it's kind of far away, so I don't know how good it is. I had a lapel mic last year, but it was crappy. It sounded like I was in a tin can. So you got to kind of mess around with things and talk to people and figure out what works for you. Steven, do you want to talk about what yours was?
Yeah. So I actually, when I was competing, I actually got some basic lighting and not really even as good as what Aaron had initially. I've since gotten better lighting. Box lighting is what was recommended. So I ended up getting that. As far as mics are concerned, there's I'll just kind of demonstrate real quick. There's the webcam mic, which you can hear right now. There's the webcam mic.
Oh, wow.
Compare that against what I'm wearing, which is the highest end, the Rode mic that I have. So can you hear a difference here with the way it sounds?
Big difference.
It's a big difference, right?
Right.
And then there's also, let's see, this other mic.
Oh, that mic doesn't work so well.
Can you hear this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this mic is the cheaper mic. It was like 50 bucks. And I use this actually to compete with in the finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking. And it's okay. It's better than the webcam mic, but it's not, it kind of cracks at points. So it's not quite as good. But the Rode mic, it's a little pricier. It's a couple $100. You don't want to break the bank. Everyone has their own budget. I tend to buy these things just because I can use them for other things and I can write them off. So you don't have to break the bank. This one that I'm talking on right now, it's called a Alvoxcon. It's actually better than the webcam mic, and you can get it on Amazon. But the Rode mic you can't find on Amazon even. It's something that I got at Best Buy. So if you're interested in the Rode mic, that's.
And I think that
Rode?
Stephen raises a good point. There's like good enough up until a certain stage. Like I don't think you should pay a lot of money for coaching and for lights and this, but if you make it to a certain level and what level you may judge, maybe district, you might want to make a little bit more of an investment or have your district or club help you out if money is tight to make an investment in a little more decent lights or coaching or anything to help you better yourself, better your presentation.
Yeah. And so there's all sorts of budgets, and you can find people that can help you for free. You don't have to pay for a coach, like Aaron said, if you know some people. But it depends on what your budget is. But what I learned from the World Championship of Public Speaking is at that stage, if people can't hear you properly, if they don't see you properly with the proper lighting, your message doesn't come across well. It doesn't come across as authentically as you want to be. And that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with your surroundings, but perception is everything. And it just goes back to the message.
The way I
because
look at it is, the way I look at it is, if you're going to speak at a speech contest, you would probably want to dress up a little bit. You know, you wouldn't show up there in jeans and a ratty t-shirt and speak. It's similar to that when it comes to speaking virtually. And if you're looking to do anything outside of the club, if you're looking to make speaking even part of your work, you want to be able to do it well, and you want to be able to put off a good presentation. And it doesn't really cost that much money. I know, a couple $100 might be a little bit much for some people's blood, but if you save up, you can buy them one at a time and test and see what works for you. We are running close to out of time, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. This was Aaron, what was this one about? I don't remember this one.
This is pretty straightforward. I said it before, no virtual background. When you present yourself, it's good to do solid colors, no like complicated patterns. You don't want to, certainly wearing color is good, but you don't want to have like weird, crazy patterns that will visually distort the camera in any way. You don't want to have that distract from your speech unless it's really a part of your speech. Like, I was 17 and I dressed crazy, and then you have like this crazy blouse. Sure, then you can dress like that. But if it's not, you don't want that to be the focal point of your speech. And then like I said, I'm a big fan of not having any distracting elements. I've seen a lot of people make it far, and they like just that one painting on the back of the wall to me is super distracting. I'm like looking like, what is that painting? What is that? Is that a print, or is that like, I think you should just clear out as much as you can. Even a bookshelf, super like that. The bookshelf's the most distracting thing you can have, because everyone's trying to read what your books are. And
I want to see what books you have.
yeah, so that's all that slide is. I think we covered that.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. So you want to make sure we're getting people listing questions, guys. Just to take a second, if you guys have questions, feel free to list them in the comments, and we'll address them when we get done. When it comes up to setting your stage, the way you use it, I like to think of it as when you take a picture, you want to have headspace between the top of your head and the top of the camera. You want to have enough width that if you're going to do like big arm movements, you don't want your arms to get cut off. You don't want to have to do this if it's big, it doesn't work right. And you also want to be able to stand, be able to get up close and be able to move back a little bit if you need to do that for dramatic effect as you're speaking. That takes some practice, but it's not too hard to do. You guys have comments on it?
yeah, Aaron, you want to go first?
Yeah, the intention of, I mean, I agree with everything you said, Joe, but the intention of the slide was to encourage people in their blocking to take advantage of width, depth, and height.
Oh, okay.
So as
Yeah.
you move around in front of your camera, you want to have anchor points. I don't know who knows what an anchor point is in your story. An anchor point is like you're telling what your story is, and there may be like, I was 14 and boy, I was out of control, and you may take a step to the right. Then this is like this 14-year-old Aaron. And then as I got older, I realized, oh, life has meaning. And I was 19 years old, and I said, I'm going to be somebody. And then now I'm here on this part of the stage. This is an anchor point. And then when you refer back to that 14-year-old boy, I point back to my anchor point when I was 14, the audience remembers it in their head. So, and that's using a width stage effectively, using it with anchor points. Anchor points work much better in live presentations. I'll be honest, in virtual, they sometimes come across as hokey. And so you have to be careful how you use anchor points virtually, because it's like, does he know what medium you're performing to? But I still do think subtle steps width-wise is helpful. I like them, but some people don't. And then depth, this is really effective where a lot of world champions, what's his name from 2 years ago, the world champion, he used depth really well. He started his speech like down here, like I was a mug, blah, blah, blah. And I had the science teacher, and he got up, he went all the way over here. Like using depth is a really effective. It's very memorable going back and forth. Mike Carr, is that his name? Mike Marr?
Mike Carr, yeah.
Mike Carr, yeah. Watch his speech. He used like depth and back and forth the camera really well. So blocking in those, and height is just like Mike Carr started his speech like this, very low height, and those all lead into those memorable moments that I alluded to before. And as you're blocking your thing, you might want to consider these different elements, but just remind yourself virtually, you don't want it to come across as hacky or kind of weird looking on camera.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and move on to
Oh,
Go ahead.
Steve, I
Real
saw-
Oh,
quick.
there's just one other thing. It on the virtual stage, it's not like a real stage. It's not as big as a real stage. I recommend if you're going to get to a high level, you don't want things to fall off the screen. Video yourself and mark on the floor with tape, like
Mhm.
blue tape, basically what your stage is, how far back you can go, how far to the right, to the left, and still stay within screen. So it's something that you should consider if you're using this as a virtual stage, which is going to be the case this year and maybe even next year. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's about the same size as the TEDx carpet, I would imagine.
Did they
I
already
would guess.
cancel Nashville? Is that still happening?
I don't know if they've canceled Nashville, but at least through the district, it's going to be virtual.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
At least through the district, it's going to be virtual. So, and Nashville is going to be, I think it's going to be hybrid, is what the plan was. And I don't know how that works exactly, but
Oh, that's crazy.
I guess we'll find out.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next because we're almost past. So practicing and feedback. We've got some questions about this. Let's bring them all in here. So one of the questions somebody asked, and I think we can address with it right now, is how much practice do we have as we're building a speech, as we're writing it, as we're revising it, as we're practicing? I have a funny story for that. When I was first the second year I was in the district contest, I was in my division contest. And this guy came up to me and said, I'm going to beat you this year. I practiced my speech 10 times. And I went, 10 times. I practiced my speech 10 times today. You don't have to be obsessed about it. But for me, when I'm in speech contest season, it's almost always on my mind. If I'm thinking of a story, I usually have a bunch of different elements kind of floating around. And whenever I have some downtime, I'm kind of thinking about how I want the story to work. And then as I'm writing it, I'm thinking about the pieces that I need to fix. And then as I'm starting to practice presenting it, it's just over and over and over and over again. When I was working in an office, I would practice my speech out loud as I was driving to work. And I had a 45-minute drive. So that's a good 5 or 6 times you can practice it. And then I would practice it on my lunch breaks. Where I worked, we had a big theater. And I would go there and practice, and then I would practice with my Toastmasters clubs. I would practice with the people I worked with. I would practice in the car on the way home. I would practice as I was rocking my kids to sleep. And then after all of that, I would record myself at the end of the day and then watch it the next morning and take notes and say, what do I need to work on, and go through the whole thing again. And if you're going all the way to the finals or the semifinals, you're talking about I would start writing a speech usually in October and November. And then you have your speech contest in February, and then you go all the way through the contest. You're talking about almost a full year of working on one speech. So after a while, it can get a little bit old after a while. You got to learn ways to keep it new. And I usually get to March or April, and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired of this speech. And you got to be careful, because if you do it too much, then you go to the contest and you're like, oh, I'm so tired of this speech, and then you lose, and you're like, ah. So what do you guys think about the way you practice, and who do you practice with, and what are some of the tips and tricks that you might have to get good practice and good feedback?
Aaron, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the slide. I echo definitely what was just said. There's no right way. And the answer to, I practice a lot, and it depends. Like my first 2 years, I practice a tremendous amount, probably too much. I'm a big fan virtually practicing. I will practice and send the tape off to a friend, like Joe did and Stephen did. Friends and family, they certainly get sick of it. Home club, it's hard to, they've heard it so much, they're even close to it. So it's good to find other clubs for sure, to practice your message. The problem with other clubs, though, is that my time is limited. I didn't put this on there. Feedback can be uneven, but like I don't have time often to sit through an hour and a half meeting to do my 7 minutes. And I don't want to be rude and get off a club, especially when they allowed me to come. But that's like an hour and a half, 2 hours of my time. I just don't have the time. As my own club members can vouch, I hardly ever attend my meetings lately because I don't have the time lately. There's just so much other stuff going on. So that's one of the ways. It's like, okay, well, how do you balance that? But I personally like finding my favorite way, and this is, I found this being my favorite way after 3 years, is record, especially for virtual, recording your speech. I have a network of 30 people I really trust. They're good Toastmasters. They know judging. They're judges themselves. I'll record my speech. I send it to them. I'm like, can you spend 20 minutes on the phone with me? They have a chance to watch it, or I'll do it for them live if I don't record it. And then we talk about it for 20 minutes. So it's basically like mini coaching sessions with a ton of different people. And that's my favorite way of practicing speeches these days, versus, the timing of getting in front of other Toastmasters. And Toastmasters always have opinions. They're always like, you should do this, you should do that. So, and a lot of it's valuable, but a lot of it you're like, oh, you got to know what to take and what not to take.
Yeah. When in 2016, I had heard from people who said, I went and practiced at 100 different Toastmasters clubs. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And I went to 2 or 3 of them after the district contest, and they were all like somebody goes, that was a great speech, but you should totally change everything. And I'm like, ugh. And like Aaron said, you just can't go to every meeting. Who's got time for that? And I'm not, the person who had told me that was single and didn't really have anything else going on except their job. So they had the time for that. I'm married with 5 kids. So for me, I've got it in my mind. Like I've got 3 nights a week where I work on creative stuff. And that's after everybody's in bed. So usually from 10 until 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, I'll work on some books that I'm working on or practice my speeches. And then like Aaron said, I got a group of people I'm working with. In fact, last year, Aaron had started up a group of speech contest stuff on Facebook, which we mentioned later in this. And then a subset of us got together and we're practicing our speeches together. There was me, I think you were there, and David Levy and
Right.
a couple of other people. And we were all helping each other throughout the year. And as we were competing, I probably should have invited Steven, but I wasn't friends with him on Facebook at the time. So, but yeah, you get a group of people whose feedback you trust. And then that means a lot more to me than going to all of these different meetings, because you get good feedback, but it's an awful lot of time investment, and it's really hard to get a good ROI on that. And that just sounds kind of callous, but it's just the truth for me. So I got to set up boundaries for my time, because I want to be present for my family, and I want to be present for my kids and my job, of course, because I don't want to lose my job. But so you got to find time. And but I think for me, there's a lot of other things that I do in my day that I could just not do. Like I don't need to play video games. I don't need to watch TV. There's really nothing good on TV that I want to see. So I want to work on these things that are towards goals that I want to do. And then once the contest is over, or once a book that I'm working on is done, then I take a break and do some of those things, and then get back into other creative things. Steven, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, that pretty much covers it. I think the next slide actually kind of goes into the feedback part of it.
Okay.
I mean, these are basic questions that Aaron poses to his audiences. And I agree with all of them, because you may feel that your message is understandable, but if your audience didn't understand it, then you need to go back to the drawing board. And so I think that this slide basically encompasses what we're talking about. The one caveat I would say is, if you hear the same feedback more than once, take it seriously. That doesn't mean that you need to change it necessarily, but you should take it seriously and weigh very carefully whether you should keep it in or not. And I've had to do that with several speeches. And sometimes you have to kill your darlings and let go of things that don't necessarily add to your speech, but especially if they turn off people.
And that's true for speeches too. Like in my finals round, I practiced my speeches really hard. In one speech, and I gave 2 speeches once, and I loved them both. I thought they were great. Should have won that thing. I'm just kidding. But one speech everyone loved, this speech I gave in the semifinals, and my final speech, everyone was, yeah, it's good. But I refuse. Like sometimes you have so much, you're so invested in your own speech, it's hard to know. And I probably should have known that maybe I should have a new speech, a different speech altogether. And so don't be afraid, especially if you make it to the semifinals where you need 2 speeches for sure. Don't be afraid to really revisit. It's good when you're practicing this time of year, like now, to have like 4 speeches, like literally 4 that are not polished, but 4 speeches that you have that you're working in rotation, because then you can swap out or swap in one of them if the other one's not working.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And you also got to pay attention to the people who are giving you feedback. I had a speech that I did for a contest a few years back where I had this part, like, I just loved this thing that I was doing in the speech. It was very dramatic. I was like this big dramatic moment. And I had given it to Jim Key, who won in, I think, 2004, 2005. And he said, that is very cringy. You need to cut that out. And I thought of, like, I said, Jim Key's telling me this. I should really think about it, because nobody else had said that but him. And I really thought about it, and I said, I really like it. I'm going to leave it in. And then I went and did the contest, and I finished second, of course, because that's my place. And then I went back and watched the video later, and I'm like, because once you get some distance from it, and it's not like it every day in your face, it's easier to look at it more objectively. So I went back and watched it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty damn cringy. I should not have done that. Jim Key was right. So you really, pay attention to who's giving you feedback. If it's just some random person, it's all right to let it go. But if it's somebody like, like Aaron or Steven or Jim Key or somebody who's got a lot of weight, then you go, well, no, I really, really should consider it. And then also, I completely forgot what I was going to say after that. So there we go.
And yeah, just use the feedback that fits your style. I mean, I can't speak like Aaron. I can't speak like Joe. I just use my own style, and I have to find what fits that. So,
well, to be fair, sometimes I have trouble speaking like Joe, so we'll see. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, which is practice makes progress, not perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. You're always going to be something that you can improve on, or something that you just don't feel good about. Yeah. So.
Nothing to add here.
All right, so we got next steps for you guys. What can you do if you're looking to compete, if you're looking to, even if you're just looking to get better, with or without competition? Join a great club. I think for me, it's been transformative joining this club, because I had been in with several clubs that were just kind of ho-hum, and I would win the speech contest and go to the area contest, but I really wasn't learning and growing. I feel like I've been learning and growing as a part of this club. So I'm glad to be here. You got to find a club that works for you. If you're looking for a storytelling based club, this is a great club to be a part of. I'm really glad to have found it all the way across the country here in Florida. Also, join a group
in Florida. So if you live out of state or even out of country, this day you can join any club and multiple clubs. And I want to flag, Joe's one of our best members, and he lives out of state. So if you live out of state, you can still join a club.
Way out of state.
Yeah,
I am Florida man.
Joe's out of state and still won our club contest last year. So
I don't know what I'm going to do when we're back in person.
We caught a lot of flack for that because they thought we were putting in a ringer.
And honestly, contest. the reason, and I've seen a lot of people doing that. I've seen a lot of big competitors who are like, I'm going to go join a club out in the middle of nowhere and just win that district. And I did not want that to be the case. The reason I was doing it is because my club died. I had 2 or 3 clubs. One of them died, and then I got a new job, so I couldn't be in the other one. And all the other clubs I knew were all meeting at like 7 o'clock my time, when all the kids are going to bed and we're dealing with homework. So I said, I got to find something on the West Coast. And I couldn't find anything. I had actually started talking to a club in Oregon. And I was going to go to their club meeting, and then like the entire state of Oregon caught on fire at the end of 2020. And I was like, okay, they're not meeting for several months. So I just, in my mind, was saying, I'm just not going to compete next year. And then Aaron posted something on Facebook in January and said, our club is looking for members and we're having a speech contest in February. And I said, oh, great, I'll join. And I've loved the club, and I wanted to compete. And I'm glad I was able to do that, but I've always been like, I don't want them to think I'm going in and trying to just roll over everybody. Obviously, I can't because we've got 2 finalists and they've been farther than I have. So, but yeah, and you never know. The year I was in the semifinals, the person who won my semifinals had to do her 6th speech the day before the club contest just so she could compete, and then she went all the way to the finals that year. So you never know who's gonna do well. So join a group of like-minded individuals like we've talked about. Find your tribe and help your tribe do well. There's a link to the international contest group. Is that still going on? I haven't looked at it for a while.
It's still there. It's not as active as it once was, but it's still there and it's free to join. So might as well. Here's some
Oh,
good
cool.
conversations.
I'll probably jump back in and start annoying people again. Start putting your speech together now. There's no time like the present to get started. Practice and refine. And then I've got the comments over the last piece, so I can't see what it is. Compete and have fun. That's the important part. Is you don't compete you want to win, but as long as you're having fun and as long as you're learning and growing, that's what matters. And that's what keeps me coming back every year. I keep telling myself, if I ever win the whole thing, I'll be sad that I don't get to do it again because it's so much fun. So as long as you're having fun, that's what I think you should do. So you guys have any more comments about that?
Yeah, there's just one thing I want to say in closing. Basically, perhaps the most noble desire any human can have is to have a positive difference in the lives of others, something worthy of being remembered for. And that's why developing the power to touch the hearts and minds of others through your words is so rewarding. The journey to the World Championship of Public Speaking is not about winning a trophy. It's about growing and learning to be the best, most memorable speaker you can be. And that journey never ends. So I hope that you'll all take this journey with us, and don't be afraid to compete because you have nothing to lose. Aaron?
I'll just echo that. That was very well put. And I will echo that. And I think we should open it up for questions if anyone has any questions.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
we're over time, so let's hear some questions.
I have a question, Mr. Speaker. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Chain. Hi, all of you, Mr. Sanson and Mr. Shaw. What would you do different if you have the chance to do all over again? What did you learn? Point number 1, point number 2. When Margaret Page was the Toastmaster 2 years ago in the World Championship of Public Speaking, she asked the winners, which comes first to you? What's premium? Is it storytelling or performance? And all of them said performance. Do you agree with that or disagree? Explain. And last point, the Zoom feature is a factor in your presentation and also in the judging. How sophisticated can you do or you do to achieve that ultimate persona in Zoom technology?
You want to each take one of those questions? I think you had 3 questions
It's
there.
like, yeah, 3 questions. Which one do you want, Aaron? I'll take the last one.
You wanted, I wanted that one. That
Oh,
was
you
the
can
low-hanging
have the
fruit
last one. Why don't you start, Aaron?
Okay.
Answer the question
so-
you want to answer.
Yeah, sure. Zoom. Yeah, there's nothing you can do. It's the nature of this virtual contest and the nature that we're all at our houses with different types of equipment. It's not a fair playing field. It's just not. We have to accept that this way is not a fair playing field. There are people with more high-end equipment. Their internet connections may be better. The judges may have better internet connections for one contestant versus another contestant. Try not to think about those things if you can. And if you're in a position where you can't afford good equipment, again, that sucks. And that's really unfair. And I think that, Toastmasters want to help other people. So if you're in that position and you reach out to your club or your district, hopefully someone puts out a helping hand and it enables you to at least try and up your equipment so it's a little bit more of a fair playing field. All right, that's the answer. So you guys can take the other 2.
Joe, you want to go?
Yeah.
Which one do you want?
I'll do the storytelling versus performance. Personally, I have to say storytelling. I'm going to go disagree with them. And the reason why is I remember watching a TED talk from Ken Robinson, I think his name was. He was a guy out of England. He was a horrible performer, horrible speaker, all kinds of ums and ahs, was getting lost and went down a bunch of different roads. But the story that he told was captivating. And he didn't do a very good job telling it, but it's one of the most popular TED Talks about how does education affect kids or something like that. I think you can win a lot more with a very good story than you can by a very bad story and a lot of flashy delivery. I think both are important. I think they're both very important, but I would give storytelling the edge because storytelling affects the heart the way that performance doesn't. So that's mine. Very easy answer for me on that one.
Thank you.
Steven.
I totally echo that because I'm definitely not as good an actor as Aaron, but that doesn't keep me from speaking well. So that's the important thing, that you can tell a really good story and you don't have to be a great actor. You don't have to have the best performance. I think the third question was, what would I change if I were to do it again?
Yes, sir. What would you do different?
What would I do different? I'd start earlier. Like I said, when I competed against Joe at the club contest, I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. It was a speech that I'd had for years. I'd been working it for years and I'd been tweaking it, but my mindset wasn't ready. My heart wasn't in it when I competed. It wasn't polished enough. And that's why I only took third place at the club level. I had fortunately an extra week to practice and develop it for my other club, but I wasn't ready. But by the time I got to district, I was ready. So I'd start earlier. Any other questions?
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
There was one question in the chat. Somebody asked, are you allowed to use another person or pet as a prop for the virtual contest? And what about the in-person contest? You can use props, but I don't think you can use a person or a pet. So I think there are limitations. You have to read the rule book. There's a rule book out there and they're changing it all the time. So you can download it from Toastmasters International, but I don't think you're allowed to use a person or a live animal. That would be weird.
I wouldn't recommend that anyway, because you don't know what a live animal is going to do.
Yeah. Any other questions that we've missed? I know people put some in the chat. I'm trying to go back and look.
I want to ask Mr. Samson one more question. Mr. Samson, I heard the word cliche 5 times from you. Is there such a thing as a cliche speech?
Again, this is my opinion, but yes, I think there is. And again, a lot of it comes back to that story. So if it's a cliche speech with a very cliche story, with a story that's not that interesting, that's not, I was down and out. I hit rock bottom and then I pulled myself up, and then, there's ways there, that there could be very cliche. So I simple answer is, my opinion is yes, there are cliche speeches and cliche stories, and that's not to say that those stories or presentations can't win a Toastmasters contest, because they can, but I still think they're cliche.
But if there are stories from your own life, then it's not so cliche, because it has your own experience.
Right.
Sure. One of the things Darren LaCroix and Mark Brown have said on many occasions, they do a review every year of the finalists, and they've said on many occasions they'll be sitting down to watch the finals, and they're saying, let's count how many dead relatives there are in this year's finals, because somebody always dies and somebody always learns a lesson from somebody dying. And it sounds kind of callous, but I remember sitting watching a semifinal going, like, there were like 14 dead people in the speech contest. And that can be a little cliched. So you got to watch out for that. I know in 2020, there were an awful lot of pandemic speeches, to the point where it was just like, oh, great, it's another pandemic speech. Like, you just got to watch for trends. And then you also got to watch for people, like Aaron mentioned earlier, people who are trying to mimic past year's stuff. I know a couple people tried to put on weird clothing the year after Darren Tay came out with his underwear on the outside of his suit. you see, I remember, what's her name? Lashonda Rundles in 2005 or 2006 had singing in her speech, and a lot of people did that in a few years after that. So you got to watch out to make sure that it makes sense for your speech. So there are many ways you can be cliched.
I had
All
a
right.
question.
Yes.
So last year, the winner of the speech, Verity Price, what did you guys think of her speech? I don't know what she did differently. I watched it on YouTube, and I was wondering, like, how did she make her speech different, and why did she win against, such a lot of competition?
You talk about her final speech?
Yeah, her
Yeah,
final
yeah.
speech.
Her final speech was very smoothly delivered, for one. And I think it's probably, I would have to say, other than Leander, hers was probably, probably the most smoothly delivered. She's a professional speaker, which helps. But she actually had practiced a lot for this. She delivered to clubs all around the world. And I know because Lance was her coach and he was mine too.
Okay.
so she was very smooth. Her message was good. I think that overall, I think it was just the smoothest delivery. It was probably not it was an important message because she talked about how you can change your life. You just have to make that determination. So you have to have a combination of the delivery, a message that is deep and a good story. And so she had all three of those. And so that's why I think that she had won. I think that she definitely deserved to be in that range. I didn't always agree with all the placings, all the people who placed, but and I'm sure I wasn't the only one because I know Lance also didn't agree with everyone who placed, but it is what it is. So there's a lot of subjectivity. To me, overall, she had a very good speech, very good message, and a good story. So
Everyone's always different. Like especially when you make it to a certain level, after a lot of speeches, you'll feel like, whoa, how did that happen? And then people will come up to you and be like, you were robbed. I cannot believe that. What, so, this is a subjective, non-professional contest. And so you have to take all that with a grain of salt, and you may not, it sounds like you didn't love her speech, but the judges that day thought she was the best, or however they tabulated the scores, she came out on top. And so, you have to take that. And that's why it's important to be true to yourself and true to your message and true to your story. Because then once you finish this process, you can feel good about yourself, whatever way you got your story out, you got your message out, and you were true to yourself. And so, it's a hard game to play, to try and play the contest game. You want to do it to an extent, but you don't want to do it at the expense of your own values and style.
Let me piggyback on that issue. Let me piggyback on that, Dr. Chin and Mr. Samson. So the judging is very subjective. So is there a way you could make it objective? Something as fair? And could you respond to that through your knowledge of psychology, maybe? So that's
personally, I have my own opinions. I don't think a lot of judges follow the ballot to a T. Based on some contests I've seen, they end up going with their gut and what they like. And I think that one way to make it more fair is judges' ballot should be more public after the contest.
Wow.
I think that there might be, I don't know. There's other solutions I have. It's a good question. I haven't thought fully, but what it's not going to, it's nothing I'm going to try and advocate for because it's not worth it to me. But I think there are ways more fair.
I think Sophie wants to ask a question.
Go ahead, Sophie.
Do you have any tips for people who have like a very small voice, because you guys have really, really good vocal variety. So for somebody like very petite and have a tiny voice, like any tips on how to improve in that area without being so dramatic that it looks fake?
One of the things I do, my voice has a very small range when I'm speaking. So one of the things I do is I warm up as if I were getting ready to sing. And that widens my voice and it deepens my timbre a little bit, and it makes it easier for me. I've heard some people, it just takes practice to get to speak from the diaphragm instead of speak from the back of your throat. It's learning some of those things. I've had people who have taken voice lessons from professional singers and professional speakers to really increase the size of your voice. There's to a certain extent, you really can't overcome a lot of that. So you just got to work with your limitations. I know I had a serious, like, for example, everybody's got different limitations. I had a serious knee injury in 2012. So when we're on stage and I'm moving around, like, I constantly get dinged for looking like I'm stiff. And I go, yeah, I am stiff because I've got a knee that doesn't work. But there's nothing you can do about that. So you try to build your speech around what your voice is. I would say get it to the best that you can, and work with some professionals to help you, or work with friends to help you, and try to just keep trying your best, because everybody's going to present differently. Everybody's going to look differently. Everybody's going to sound differently. Some things you just can't overcome. But I don't think your voice sounds that bad. So I think you have a decent voice. So I think you'd be fine.
Well, it got you to the
Somebody-
district finals 2 years ago, Sophie. So you're not that bad off. And actually, my voice is, I tend to be quiet too. So I think you can learn some speech exercises that will bring that up if you want to bring out your volume and energy. But it's all about devoting the energy to delivering your speech. If you have the energy, then you feel it and it comes out. So, and it takes practice.
Somebody asked in the comments if Elaine or Nancy had any feedback or experience they'd like to share.
Joe, you want to take the slide set off so we can just see
Yeah.
each other?
Stop. Give me a moment. Oh, wrong mouse. There we go.
Great. I got my hair done today, so I'm glad you guys can see me.
Me too.
One thing I would like to share, and I think Aaron can echo this, is if you really want to work on timing, work on stand-up comedy, because things have to move very quickly. And it's quite challenging though in this virtual space, because you can't always tell what the reaction time is. And one of the things I found is to not, what they say, stuff on a line. So when you're doing something and you're putting in a pause, you have to put in the pause, and you have to hope that everybody's kind of with you. I hate that they turn the cameras off in these competitions now, and that you have no idea if people are with you or not with you. Another thing you can do is look into the types of exercises that voice actors do. I do some voiceover training, and before I go to, I do some voiceovers, and I've taken some training. And before I step up the mic to do a recording, and it could just be, a simple, what might seem like a dull, boring e-learning narration, but I work through some different exercises. One thing I'll do is I have a wine cork. I usually have more than one around, but I have one right by my voiceover booth, and I'll put the cork in and I'll talk with the cork in my mouth, because it forces me to move my mouth in a different way. And then I get a stronger vocal quality. And even just doing things like up and down, and really, you feel like you sound stupid, but I live alone, so it doesn't matter. I can be stupid all the time. No one's gonna criticize me but me, and that does happen. But anything you can do to really think about warming up your voice. Think about if you get up in the morning and that first Zoom call that you're on, your voice isn't as good then as it is an hour or two later. So that's a couple of things I got.
Elaine, did you have anything you wanted to share?
I'm just in awe of you guys, and I'm learning a lot. So no, I have never gotten beyond division in international. So I just
Well-
in awe, and I'm inspired to try again because
Just keep going. You'll get there because
Yep.
I've only made it there twice myself. So
Yeah.
Eventually,
never
you
know.
too can finish second every year.
I think Katie has a question too.
Yes, Katie.
I do have a question. My question is, and it was kind of brought up on vulnerability in your speeches. Is there like too much vulnerability? Is there like a story, if you have something that's kind of dark, but you really want to talk about it, is that going to be too much and maybe something you should avoid? Or how do you work that in a way the audience is going to?
That's a really good question.
It is.
I have been coached from coaches or from world champions, like you do want to avoid like politics. You want to avoid, if you get too dark with like, say you were, say someone had a experience as a child that they were, molested, and it's a story that is very dear and near to their heart. It might make the audience feel a little bit uncomfortable, and there might be topics that I don't know that you should avoid, but just be aware of the effect that it has on your audience. And the only way to know that is to do it. So I would definitely recommend you write the speech, whatever this topic is, because you want to get this out. Like this is something you want to create and write the story and create the message from. But then when you're delivering it live, ask them, did it make you feel uncomfortable? Because it might not be a contest speech. I still think it should be a speech for you. It just might not be a contest speech once you get that live feedback from doing it from a lot of people. Because if you're making people feel super uncomfortable because they feel really bad for you or what, it might not have the effect that you want it to have.
All right, we can take one more.
Let me ask one more, Dr. Chen. The title of the speech, is that part of the speech? I have read 100 books in public speaking, and there's not one book that says about how to write a title, how to make it intriguing, how to make it related to the thesis of the speech. Is title really important in a speech?
Title
Is
is
very,
yeah.
Go
It is. Go ahead, Joe.
title is very important. It can play a role in the way the audience works. So if you go back to 2016 finals, Aaron Beverly had a 56-word title to his speech.
Oh, wow.
And the way they delivered it was they just said the first couple words and then a few more words, and then the audience started laughing, and then a few more words, and the audience was rolling by the time they got to the end of the speech title. And then they said Aaron Beverly, and then they had to say the speech title again, and everybody was just dying and laughing. And that got everybody on his side before he even took the stage. You're not always going to have that level of connection to your speech title, but you can do a speech title that is that makes people think like, what is that about? And you'll answer that question as you're doing the speech. Or you might have a title that is very relevant to your message. I've seen a lot of people who have a speech title that is completely unrelated to what their speech was. And then the audience is asking, what does the title have to do with their speech? So you got to think about how it's connected. I think it's important. It can be very important, but it can be very intriguing, but most of the time it's just, it's part of it, but not the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Joe said, and it's you want your title to kind of hint at what your message is, but not give it away. So you don't want to give it away at the beginning because everyone likes a surprise toward the end. So it's just something that, for me, speech titles are something I come up with fairly naturally after I've given the speech, after I've written the speech, but the title is something I write after I'm done writing the speech usually.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, doctor.
All right, so
I think we're
We
over
are-
time.
we're way over time. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to share them with, I don't know, send them all to Stephen, and we'll answer them the best we can, maybe in an email format or something.
So for all of our guests tonight, I just want to remind you to sign into the guest link. Andy, do you want to put the guest link up on the chat? The guest sign-in link? If you haven't already done so? And
Let me see the sign link.
And, I just want to kind of open it up to, I normally would ask guests for their feedback, but since we're so far over time right now,
Yeah.
I wanted to have you just email me. I'm at powerdoc65@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. So you guys can all email me if you have any questions, and I welcome you to come back to our regular meeting. Our next regular meeting will be February 8th. So I want to say that there's a reason why we focus on storytelling in this club, because storytelling is powerful and it helps you connect. And if you look at all the international speeches, they all have stories. I don't think you'll find a single speech that actually, at least not that makes it to the district level, that is not a story.
Thank you. The three of you are all great, and you're divine, and please do more of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And I want to remind our members to stay for a little bit, because we're going to be talking about our evaluation contest that we're having, our evaluation workshop rather, that we're having in March. And we need to talk about our contests, our speech contests, which will be February 22nd. So let's see. Let me enter my email real quick for our guests.
And how Steve is right now is probably not what he did when he competed.
Yeah, well, when you're competing, you're focused on delivering your message, right? Not
You just-
typing in the
not
chat.
typing, I know. I
Steve?
actually,
Oh,
I
go
have
ahead.
a standing desk that I love because I have a small space, so I can be seated, right like this. But then,
My desk is not
then
as
if it's
fancy.
about
It's
here, I'll stand up. See,
She's drowning. She's drowning.
Hey, Steve, Joe, and Aaron, if I can just say I was your general evaluator tonight, and I know we're over, but I just want to say, what a fantastic night. I mean, this was not a presentation. I felt like I was in your living room, and each of you were sharing some personal tips to help me be a better speaker. It was wonderful. So thank you. And I think anybody who wants to give feedback or thanks should email you guys, because obviously feedback is what we really treasure so we can get better. But we ran out of time tonight. But what a wonderful workshop. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. And for our members, I want to just ask you to stick around, because we need to actually vote on holding an evaluation workshop on March 22nd led by Christian Crump. He's the 3-time district evaluation champion. And he's presented to us years ago, but has not done so recently. So I think it would be a great benefit to our new members, especially. And if learning how to evaluate well is as important as learning how to speak. Because if you don't give proper feedback, the speaker is not going to improve. And you have to deliver it in a manner that's going to be well accepted, because everyone, nobody wants to be told that they did something wrong. So
I wanted to add one quick comment. I want to thank all of you, Joe, Aaron, and Stephen, for sharing so generously, because these are tips, these are experience. Yeah, you got better at your craft, right? So and you share so generously, and despite knowing that we all might be competing again one day or whatnot, you're just sharing. So I appreciating it, and I love the spirit of and the camaraderie of going through this together.
Thank you, Sophie. And thanks to Joe and Aaron for helping us put this together. These were mainly Aaron's slides, and Joe helped revise them a little bit so that we could present them as the three of us. Sophie is a previous district finalist, and we're very fortunate to have so many talented members of our club. Nancy's been a I think you've been a finalist before, right, Nancy?
When I lived in Virginia,
Yeah. So we're
both
fortunate.
evaluation and international when I lived in Virginia.
Yeah.
And like the clubs in Virginia is like, the whole state is the size. This is many clubs. It's kind of a.
Yeah, that was North Carolina when I lived there. The whole state
And
was the district.
it was very interesting, particularly in the Richmond area. If you spoke with the cadence of Dr. King, you were in. We had a lot of Baptist preachers.
Well, that's
Yeah,
great.
what do I know? I was a Yankee when I was there, so.
Oh, Andy, you want to turn off the recording?